I'm going to break down everything we know so far about outpost building, research stations, as well as hiring crew and companions in Starfield for you, as there's been quite a lot of exciting and interesting information released since the Starfield Direct presentation back in June. So by the end of this video, you'll be fully up to speed on what all of these in-game mechanics do and why they're worth your attention. So how does it all work? Well, let's first start with base building, or outposts, which will be familiar to you Fallout 4 players, which Todd Howard, the game director, describes as being the home away from home, which will be essential for survival and resource generation. In fact, the good thing about this whole gameplay mechanic is, as confirmed by Bethesda's lead landscape artist, Matt Carafano, outposts can be built almost anywhere on any planet you visit. And I'll break down the limitations for you shortly, but before you do start building, you'll need to have collected enough resources to create an outpost beacon, as you can see here. And as soon as you place this beacon down in a location that you want, we will then have the option to name the outpost and start building different types of structures for specific purposes, which can then be run by your own crew members. That said, an important detail to know about this outpost beacon, because if I just pause this clip and zoom in here for you, you'll notice that the planet here has been 100% surveyed, meaning that you and I would have already ran around the planet scanning all fauna, creatures and locations. And I do wonder if this is a prerequisite before we can actually create outposts, meaning that we have to explore the whole planet and obtain the initial resources that we need to build the beacon by using our electromagnetic cutter, as you can see here. Incidentally, Todd went on to say in a recent Kind of Funny Games podcast that shipbuilding and outpost building are the two most deep and complicated systems in the game, where outposts can also be considered the biggest economic generation for players, where we're able to harvest resources of a specific planet and then shuttle those resources to different trade posts that we own around the settled systems to make a profit. And that's the difference in this game comparatively to Bethesda's Fallout 4, for example, where the goal there was to primarily rebuild a wasteland as part of the RPG storyline, whereas here in Starfield, its core goal for us as players is more gameplay focused, which is based around harvesting materials, resources and fuel that then compound over time the longer you play, and subsequently allows us to make more money so we can buy better equipment, upgrade our gear and Starship, and then gives us more options to build more outposts to then rinse and repeat that process until we're space cowboy trillionaires. And that got me thinking, do we really need to create lots of different outposts around the galaxy if we just find one Goldilocks planet that has all the resources that we need? Well, yes, we will, because every outpost we build in Starfield will be limited in terms of how many structures that we can actually construct there, as you can see from the build limit tab here. So we can't build a complete all-in-one Martian city, so to speak, as there will always be a building cap limit. And that leads us nicely onto the rest of these building stat tabs, which were briefly teased in that Starfield Direct presentation, because it will be so incredibly important to manage each one of these info tabs if you're going to be successful in Starfield. And if you've played any city builder games recently, then this will be familiar to you as well as a kind of general gameplay mechanic, because cargo here represents how much total storage or inventory space our outpost currently has. So when producing resources, this number is of course going to increase. And our second outpost tab here is crew, which, as you'd expect, denotes how many crew members we currently have working at our outpost or doing research, which I'm going to go through with you shortly, because I think it's one of the highlights of outpost building and all the info we know about it so far. Thirdly, we have needed power, which is the total amount of energy that is required to run our outpost efficiently, with each new room expansion you add to your outpost subsequently increasing the power consumption overall. And speaking of which, the total power tab here being the overall amount of energy or power your outpost is generating from devices such as solar panels, wind turbines, nuclear reactors and generators. And arguably the most interesting stat you will want to focus on is the production per minute icon here, which is the amount of resources that your outpost is generating per minute. So for example, let's say that you set up your diggers to mine aluminium from the Parima 3 planet, as you can see here from its resource panel in the map menu. Well, this production per minute icon is going to inform you how much aluminium you're processing in your outpost, which you can then either sell for a profit or use to build more outposts. And if I just pause and zoom in again here, as you can see, it's a necessary resource to build more hab extensions. So a very important resource overall. In fact, we may need to use it as a resource for building repairs, because there is an integrity meter at the top of the outpost screen here, which suggests that our outposts can fall into disrepair if we don't have any crew members actively looking after them. So I imagine alien or bandit attacks will be occurring frequently here, or even environmental degradation will be playing an active and third-party role here as well, just like when a tornado suddenly appears in the City Skylines game and ruins all of your careful planning. So expect random events like this in Starfield when it comes to your outposts as well. Now, as for limitations of outposts, one of the errors we've seen when trying to place a new building on the surface is the foundation is too tall here, which suggests that if you're building on uneven terrain, you're going to have to use a different type of building extension to connect the main airlock, which we can see the developers do exactly that here. It also gets me thinking that there's an invisible in-game ceiling where you can't go building your outpost too high on elevated terrain or mountainsides due to the incompatibility of some of the modules. So I think sticking to flat ground will be the most effective way for us to get the most out of our outposts in game. Now, just as we were speaking of these modules, let's actually breeze through a few of them now that you'll be able to build and what they actually do, including the research lab, which we'll go through together next. Now, this outpost beacon is a communication device that allows us to chat to our space fleet and receive messages from others in the galaxy. We also have the watchtower and military hub also listed here, with the watchtower being a freestanding structure, so it doesn't need to be connected to the actual main outpost, that will be used to protect our outpost overall, and confirms to me that we can expect some alien or pirate scouting missions to probe our defenses, and that's why having this military hub may also be a solid consideration when building your outpost early on, as having trained crew members there who can get access to weapons, armor, and level up their combat skills may also improve our defensive capabilities, as teased by hiring Marika Burrows here in the Starfield Direct presentation. That said, if we don't have the credits to be able to pay for military focus personnel at our outposts, we can build ourselves a security mini-bot that patrols the interior of our outpost and will alert us of incoming threats and danger, so we can gravity jump back to our outpost just in time to save the day. We also have extractors listed here, which I presume are the drills that dig into the planet for resource generation, and a hydroponic hab, which is an interior garden or greenhouse that produces medicine, herbs, crops, food, and H2O to help us sustain our lives and our crew members' lives throughout our travels in the settled systems. But what about this science habitat module? Well, Matt Carafano, the lead landscape artist, confirmed recently that research stations in outposts will help you utilize the resources you've generated to help craft weapon mods that we will need to use to survive. And this is what you can see here in this clip, where your research laboratory will allow you to research 5 different categories worth of unlocks to help us become more effective in Starfield depending upon our gameplay preference. The first one being pharmacology, which allows us to research upgrades that will make healing consumables more effective in game, as well as performance enhancing drugs that will have several benefits in and out of combat. Now, our second research option here is food and drink, which I imagine will allow us to have a more versatile menu range when it comes to recipes to make. And we already know from a few clips shared by the team that consuming food can have advantages and disadvantages, as you can see here on the orange juice stat page. Now, our third option is the Outpost Development Research tab. So if you're really interested in establishing a very profitable trade route of your own across the galaxy from outpost to outpost, then perhaps focusing all of your resources in researching upgrades for your outposts is definitely the way to go. But perhaps you're more interested in pirating and being Iron Man in space. Well, then you'll want to focus on the equipment and weaponry panels here at the bottom, which will allow you to research upgrades for your spacesuit and modifications that you can attach onto your weapons, with Tim Lamb, the senior producer, stating in an interview that there is more mods and more weapons in Starfield than any other game Bethesda has ever made before, which Jed Brown, the lead level designer, added to this by saying that modding weapons will be very important as it will help players adapt to the weapon of their own playstyle, such as crafting a silencer on your gun for stealth-orientated players. So in short, the research laboratory will be an important mechanic in this game that will open up a lot of unlocks and upgrades, and even though it hasn't been shown to us yet, I imagine that these research projects will vary in completion time. So for example, it will take X amount of hours for the barrel mods 2 upgrade to be completed, and I wouldn't at all be surprised if that research timer is sped up by hiring a crew member with the appropriate skill set, such as hiring Hella here, who has a 3-star skill set when it comes to outpost engineering, as well as a 1-star skill in geology. So I imagine that our resource production per minute stat, which we discussed earlier, would increase when we send Hella to work on our mining base on a distant moon, because he's got the skills to improve that mining resource generation. Now, if you are enjoying the video so far, please do leave a very quick like down below. It does help me out on YouTube, so thanks very much for your support. And good news, I'm running a Starfield game giveaway. You just need to be a subscriber of the channel to enter, and I'll pop the link in the pinned comments. So very best of luck to you. Now, as for crew and companions, we can actually hire random NPCs we meet out in the galaxy due to their particular set of skills, as confirmed by Todd. But I think it's important to distinguish that there are 2 different types of companions in Starfield. The first category is the ones we've just been discussing, random NPCs that don't directly contribute to the main story, but we can hire them, fire them, ignore them, and even kill them. And then there's this other category of companions, which are the 4 main storyline companions who have their own individual missions within the Constellation faction of Starfield that also happen to be romanceable. In fact, Todd went on to confirm that these 4 NPCs are more complex compared to other NPCs in the game, in that they will make it very clear to you if they like you or don't like you due to the dialogue responses you decide to choose or the decisions you make in front of them. Todd did say that it is possible to upset romantic partners in temporary ways rather than just having permanent changes or breaking the relationship off completely. And I do wonder if the team will be utilizing a similar mechanic that they implemented in Fallout 4, where if you reach the highest affinity level with a companion in terms of romance, your love interest would then provide you with a unique skill. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that utilized here in Starfield as an incentive to engage with that romance mechanic. But that said, even though there's 4 romance options confirmed by Todd, we only know of 2 so far. The first being Sarah Morgan, the leader of Constellation, and the second being Sam Coe, the ex-space cowboy of the faction 3-Star Collective. And if you're wondering if there's going to be any sort of intimate moments in the game, well, the Australian Classification Board officially rated Starfield as 18+, with nudity noted as having a mild impact. Incidentally, the ESRB also rated Starfield officially and provided us with some very interesting dialogue quotes, which I'll pop up on your screen right now for you. So if you've got your fingers crossed for anything like that in game, I think you're going to have to wait for the modding community to do their part here. Now, I've got another Starfield breakdown video for you here. So click the video on your screen right now, and I'll hopefully see you there in just a second. Big thanks to Nika, my co-content creator, for helping me make this video, and cheers for stopping by. As always, coffee is on me.